I was the most devoted man in Catherine Pierce's life. For 10 years, I was the engine that powered her ascent, taking her from an unknown conservatory student to a world-renowned concert pianist, a household name. And then, at the pinnacle of her success, I chose to walk away. Everyone called me a fool. Only I knew that this secret, 10-year crush had finally reached its expiration date. Later, a video from the engagement party of the world's top pianist would go viral. In it, Catherine Pierce, her $1 million custom gown in tatters, was tearing the city apart to find me, her eyes wild and red. When I submitted my letter of resignation, Catherine's long, elegant fingers paused over the keys of her Steinway. She turned, her beautiful eyes filled with a quiet confusion. Why? I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the practice studio, forcing my voice to remain steady. Ms. Pierce, I'm not getting any younger. It's time for me to settle down. After a beat, I added, my aunt set me up with someone back home a while ago. It's serious. It was a lie, of course. A harmless one designed to ensure a clean break. Catherine's fingers tapped restlessly on the ivory keys, a habit of hers when she was agitated. A few scattered, dissonant notes echoed in the studio, a melody of frustration. Seeing her like this sparked a bittersweet satisfaction in my chest. After a long silence, she placed my resignation letter on the piano. I can give you a vacation. As for quitting, I'd like you to reconsider. For a moment, I faltered. A voice whispered in my ear, a tempting siren song. Stay. Just stay. You could be by her side forever. But reason slapped me back to reality. Liam, she's getting engaged to Ethan Shaw. Being in love with a married woman is a line you can't cross. My hand hovered in the air, but I couldn't bring myself to take back the letter. The life of a manager is too demanding. After I get married, I want something more stable. I clear my throat. I'll make sure everything is handed off smoothly. I'm sorry, Miss Pierce. With nothing left to say, Catherine's voice softened. Understand. I wish you all the happiness in your marriage. By the time I left the studio, she was already lost in her world of music again. To her, I was probably just the most competent employee she'd ever had. I sat in the break room, staring at a framed photo of her from a past performance, and for the first time, I let my mind go blank. My days were usually a frantic blur, a whirlwind of managing her performance schedules and taking care of her personal life. I was always on call, expected to drop everything and rush to her side at a moment's notice. A one-man team doing the work of three. The pay was excellent, of course. Over the years, she'd paid me enough to buy my own apartment in Manhattan. Josh, one of the junior assistants, had to call my name several times before I snapped out of my daze. Liam is. Pierce said you should head over to the club to set up for tonight's party. The party was to celebrate the return of Ava Chun, fresh from a fellowship at the Vienna Academy of Music. The guest list was a who's who of Catherine's circle, the new generation of New York's elite, born with silver spoons and egos to match. They were an exclusive bunch, but they'd made an exception for me. I was just too good at my job. A manager who could juggle everyone's moods while orchestrating a flawless event was a rare find. Arriving at the private club in Soho, I dove straight into the preparations. I oversaw every detail, from the vintage of the red wine and the placement of the silverware to the dietary restrictions of every single guest. Swap the champagne for sparkling water. Mr. Hayes is on the wagon. Turn up the thermostat. Ms. Vanderbilt is always cold. And make sure we have that aged oolong ready. It's Ms. Chen's favorite. As dusk fell, the guests began to arrive. Ava was the first, greeting me as she walked in. When's Catherine getting here? I glanced at my watch. She's still at Carnegie Hall for a run-through. Should be here in about an hour. Ava collapsed onto a leather sofa, her face pale and etched with fatigue. I signaled for a waiter to lower the music and brought her a cashmere throw. It gets chilly in the evenings. Rest up. It'll be a while before everyone else gets here. She took the blanket with a wry smile. You know, you should quit Catherine and come work for me as a chief of staff. I'll double your salary. In this world of sycophants and yes men, my professional, unpretentious demeanor was a valuable commodity. I chuckled. I appreciate the offer, Ms. Chun. Always good to have a backup plan in case I find myself out of a job. By the time the city lights were glittering against the dark sky, the room was full. Catherine made her entrance in a stunning black evening gown, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. She was an elegant, almost untouchable vision of cool grace. I took her coat, thinking this might be the last time I'd ever perform this simple service for her. After a few rounds of drinks, I found the right moment to make my announcement. Raising my glass, I addressed the room. I just want to thank all of you for your kindness over the years. This is my last event. I wish you all the best. A brief silence fell over the table until Ava's friend, Chloe, broke it by raising her glass. Honestly, Liam, at first, we all thought you had some kind of ulterior motive with Catherine. I guess we were wrong. Everyone knew what she meant. Several of Catherine's previous male managers had been fired for professing their love for her. After that, she'd switched to female managers, but then a male assistant made headlines for trying to slip her a love letter. It was a running joke in their circle. Someone else chimed in. I didn't think anyone could actually resist Catherine's charm. Catherine took a graceful sip of her wine. Boring, she murmured with a faint smile. After dinner, a few of them gathered for drinks. Ava casually asked, Catherine, I hear Ethan Shaw is quite taken with you. My hand froze, the bottle of whiskey hovering over Catherine's glass. After a moment, she answered nonchalantly, it's a dynastic union. Marrying him is no different than marrying anyone else. In their world, marriage was a transaction, a merger of assets and influence. Love was the least important part of the equation. It seemed she had accepted her family's wishes without a fight. I'd met Ethan Shaw, a rising star in the tech world, young and brilliant. He was objectively a perfect match. I'd always hoped for a different ending for Catherine, but reality rarely cares for such hopes. The party wound down late into the night. One by one, chauffeurs arrived to whisk the guests away. Only Catherine's driver was delayed, held up by an emergency. And so we stood there, just the two of us at the entrance of the club. The streetlights stretched our shadows long and thin across the pavement. These moments of solitude were the most dangerous, when the feelings I'd suppressed for so long threatened to erupt. But Catherine just stood there quietly, the alcohol having softened her usual icy composure. Before long, her car pulled up. She turned to me. Need a ride? I shook my head, forcing a polite smile. Thanks, Ms. Pierce, but my fiancé is on her way to pick me up. She nodded once, then slipped gracefully into the back of the sedan. Finally, I was alone. I ripped off my tie and leaned against a stone planter, suddenly feeling adrift, with no idea where to go. An autumn rain began to fall, a cold, fine mist that seeped into the fabric of my suit. I stood on the street corner, trying to hail a cab, a difficult task in this exclusive part of the city. Because of road construction, the driver had to take a detour. Catherine never expected to see Liam Evans again that night. He was standing in the rain, his suit jacket draped over his arm, looking utterly lost. She was taken aback. She'd never seen her meticulously composed manager look so disheveled. At the office, he was always in a perfectly pressed suit, his tie knotted with impeccable precision. She'd met so many men who tried too hard to be alluring, loosening their ties, showing a hint of collarbone or a toned stomach, all while pretending it was effortless. But Liam was different. His professionalism and his perfect sense of boundaries were what had convinced her to keep him by her side for so long. As the car was about to drive past him, her driver spoke up. Should we offer Mr. Evans a ride? Catherine's gaze was steady. No, it's fine, she said coolly. She'd already formed a poor impression of this late-arriving fiancé. Liam was a sharp man, but his judgment in matters of the heart seemed questionable. Still, it was his personal life. It wasn't her place to interfere. From the street, I thought I saw Catherine's car flash past, but it was gone in an instant. It was probably just my imagination. In a neighborhood like the Upper East Side, someone on foot was a rare sight. The rain soaked through my shirt. My legs were numb by the time a taxi finally pulled over. It was late when I got back to my apartment. The silence was suffocating. I always told people I had it all. A wonderful family, a fiancé I adored, a wide circle of close friends. They all said my life was perfect, something to aspire to. The truth is, I had nothing. No family, no lover, no friends. When I was in middle school, my dad was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Not long after the surgery, it came back aggressively. Then, one ordinary morning, my mom walked out the door and never came back. She took all our savings, leaving me with a dying father and a mountain of debt. After the initial shock, my dad became strangely calm. He continued his treatments quietly. On his good days, he'd even cook for me. One afternoon, I came home from school to find the table laden with my favorite dishes. My dad sat across from me, a gentle smile on his face. For some reason, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. The food smelled off. Then I saw in the kitchen a new bottle of pesticide. In that moment, I understood that even a dying man could summon terrifying strength. He grabbed me, and I couldn't move. When a violent coughing fit racked his body, I broke free from his grasp and fled, scrambling up to the rooftop of our apartment building. My dad followed, his face streaked with tears, his arms outstretched. His voice was choked with grief. Son, this world is too cruel. I can't bear to leave you to face it alone. His voice cracked. Come with me. We'll be father and son again in the next life. Tears blur my vision. I was so tired. All I wanted was to smell the familiar scent of tobacco on his clothes one last time. Maybe it would be better this way. There was no hope left in living anyway. The wind howled around us, but my father's embrace was the only warmth I felt. He held my hand tightly as we slowly approached the edge. Just as we were about to fall, a pair of slender but strong hands grabbed me. She held on, refusing to let go no matter how much I struggled. As I dangled in the wind, all I could remember were her eyes, shining with fierce determination. I survived. My father did not. The person who saved me was Catherine Pierce. She didn't just give me back my life. She gave me a reason to keep living it, to repay her. I was drowning in guilt, feeling like I had betrayed my father. I was a drowning man, and Catherine was the hand that pulled me from the water. She was my hope. When the paramedics arrived, I clutched her hand, looking up at her. How can I ever thank you? 14-year-old Catherine looked down at me, her expression serious. Just come find me later. From that night on, my life was frozen in time. Catherine was the only thing that propelled me forward. Tonight, the nightmare returned, replaying the past in vivid detail. My father's ghost demanding to know why I'd abandoned him. My mother's cold, indifferent gaze as she walked away. I woke up drenched in sweat, my throat too raw to make a sound. The thermometer read 101.8. Normally, I would have popped a couple of Tylenol and gone to work, pretending nothing was wrong. But this time, I decided to call in sick. I needed to rest, to really think about where my life was headed. When Catherine arrived at the studio, she learned that Liam was out sick. She frowned, her already low opinion of his fiancé sinking even further. Her new assistant, Leo, tentatively took over Liam's duties, bringing her a cup of rose tea. Catherine took a sip, her expression unchanged. The tea was weaker than usual. She didn't say anything, but she set the cup down and didn't touch it again. Her morning rehearsal was marred by a mistake. Luckily, she knew the piece by heart and managed to recover without a major incident. The studio was a bit too warm, the humidifier was running on high, and her throat felt scratchy. Throughout the day, though she couldn't put her finger on what was wrong, she felt that something was missing. For the first time, Catherine found herself truly thinking about Liam Evans. She rarely noticed him because he was always so discreet, so seamlessly efficient. He handled everything with a quiet perfection, like a gentle rain that nourishes without ever calling attention to itself. It was as if he was never there, yet his absence made everything fall apart. She frowned. This was the second time today. It was all Liam's fiancé's fault for stealing away her most capable man. After a full day of tossing and turning, I still couldn't figure out what to do with my life. I was a lost moth, fluttering in the dark with no light to guide me. The next morning, I went to the studio as usual. As I pushed open the door, Leo scurried over, his voice a nervous whisper. Ms. Pierce has been in a terrible mood all morning. She hasn't even touched her favorite rose tea. Yesterday's cup was still sitting on the windowsill. I picked it up, sniffed it, and turned to Leo. It needs 6 fresh rosebuds, 80-degree water, and steep it for exactly 3 minutes. Not a second more, not a second less. I carefully demonstrated each step of the process as Leo watched, rapt. Just as the floral scent filled the air, Catherine walked in. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of tenderness in her eyes as she looked at me, a hint of vulnerability at the corner of her lips. The handover process was far more complicated than I'd anticipated. I had my hands in so many different projects that a quick transfer was impossible. Besides, Catherine was notoriously demanding. Every detail of her life, from the temperature of her studio to the fabric of her performance gowns, required meticulous attention. I ended up buying a notebook and started documenting everything, creating a manual for my replacement. This delay meant that the 1-month handover stretched on, leading me directly into the one situation I wanted to avoid at all costs, accompanying Ethan Shaw to the Pierce family estate. I harbored feelings for Catherine that I shouldn't. Even though I'd done nothing, I felt a deep sense of guilt facing her future husband. Ethan Shaw arrived in a bespoke suit, a Patek Philippe on his wrist, his hair perfectly styled. He radiated success. I put on my professional smile and greeted him. Mr. Shaw, Ms. Pierce asked me to pick you up. On the way, Ethan kept asking questions about Catherine. He was nervous about getting engaged to a woman he'd never met. Sensing his anxiety, I offered a reassuring smile. Ms. Pierce is a very kind person. You have nothing to worry about, Mr. Shaw. And if you have any questions, you can always come to me. He shot me a grateful look. We chatted on the way to the estate. I had planned to drop him off and leave, but Catherine's grandmother, Matilda Pierce, stopped me. She was a titan of the classical music world, a formidable woman who, even in her late 70s, possessed a sharp, piercing gaze. Liam, where's Catherine? Catherine wasn't here? I kept my expression neutral. There was a last-minute change to her rehearsal schedule. Mrs. Pierce. She might be a little late. Matilda let out a cold snort and ordered me to bring Catherine to the estate immediately. I had once witnessed her punishing Catherine, forcing her to practice for 6 hours straight until her fingers bled. The scars were still visible on Catherine's fingertips. The moment I left, I dialed Catherine's number. Thank God, she picked up on the third try. I frantically asked where she was. After a long silence, she simply said my name, Liam. Her voice was slurred, as if she were drunk. In the background, I could hear the faint sound of a piano. I knew instantly where she was. When I burst into the dimly lit jazz bar, I found her leaning against a grand piano, a row of half-empty whiskey glasses in front of her. Her dark hair was a cascade of silk against the shadows. Hearing my footsteps, she looked up. Her eyes were hazy but still held their characteristic chill. Even drunk, she maintained an air of composure. You're here? Give me a minute. I'm almost done. She patted the piano bench beside her. Sit. Talk to me for a while. The Pierce family concert hall stood on prime real estate, a glittering jewel of classical European architecture in the heart of the city. Catherine suddenly asked, Isn't it beautiful? My gaze was still fixed on the perfect line of her jaw. Beautiful, I replied automatically, my face flushed with heat, but luckily, she didn't seem to notice. She was looking out the window. All this glamour is just decoration for a cage, she said, a sad smile playing on her lips. No matter how magnificent the stage, it can't imprison a true soul. There were rumors that the Pierce family's music empire hadn't always been clean, that there were shady dealings in their past. Over the last 10 years, I had watched her climb to the zenith of the international piano world. The struggles and sacrifices she endured were things no outsider would ever know. I couldn't help but ask, Are you happy? The word happy seemed to dance on her lips before she let out a soft laugh, avoiding a direct answer. Instead, she looked at me and said, Your fiancé doesn't deserve you. I froze. She immediately looked down. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. After finishing the last of her drink, Catherine stood up, instantly transforming back into the elegant, composed pianist. On the drive back, I kept replaying her words in my mind. I couldn't figure out what she meant by them, just as I could never understand why, all those years ago, she had been on the rooftop of that dilapidated apartment building. But none of it mattered anymore. I was leaving. After this, we would be worlds apart, never to meet again. It was raining the day I left, a hard, driving rain that hammered against the pavement, as if trying to wash away all the emotions I'd kept bottled up. I sat in the manager's office off the main studio, packing my things. I'd spent nearly a decade in this room, growing from a naive kid into a man who could command a room. I knew that every day at 3 p.m., the sun would stream through the window and glint off the polished ebony of the Steinway. I knew that if you stood in just the right corner, you could hear the soft intake of Catherine's breath as she practiced. These small, stolen moments had been the most precious treasures of my life. Now it was time to let them go. My debt was paid. After 10 years, it was Ethan Shaw's turn to protect her. Leo stood by, his eyes red. I ruffled his hair and smiled. Hey, it's not goodbye forever. We'll run into each other again. But in my heart, I knew this was final. This city held too many bitter memories. I needed a new start. As I walked out, a small part of me held onto a sliver of hope that I might see her one last time. But she never appeared. After quitting, I locked myself in my apartment and slept for what felt like days, as if trying to reclaim all the sleep I'd lost over the years. I bought a bottle of whiskey and blasted Catherine's concertos on the stereo. I laughed, a crazed, hollow sound that echoed in the empty room. When the laughter died, I just sat on the floor, staring at the stacks of sheet music. When I was a kid, all I wanted was to stay alive, because if I was okay, my dad wouldn't have jumped. After he was gone, my wish was to work hard enough so my mom wouldn't give up. After she left too, I poured everything I had into my work, my only desire to support Catherine's music. Now, I was completely lost. As I was drifting in a sea of memories, the doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was Catherine. I fumbled with the lock, acutely aware of my disheveled state. It was too late to pretend I wasn't home. I opened the door, forcing a professional smile. Compared to my flustered state, Catherine was as elegant as ever. I tried calling you, she said softly. The program for tonight's performance needs to be changed. I couldn't find the backup files. I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd stop by. I fought to steady my racing heart. Of course, Ms. Pierce. Please have a seat. I'll find them for you. As I frantically searched for the files, Catherine sat sipping the tea I'd made, her eyes following my every move. Her gaze made my hands tremble. The more I rushed, the harder it was to find anything. There's no hurry, Catherine said softly. Then she asked, doesn't your fiancé live with you, Liam? The question caught me off guard. She's, working late tonight, I stammered. After a long search, I finally found the files and handed them to her. Catherine took them, but her gaze lingered on my face for a moment too long. The intensity in her eyes made my heart pound. Just as I was about to say something, she offered a cryptic smile. I'm getting married. The wedding needs a reliable person to manage it. I was wondering if you would be willing to help. Your previous salary, of course. I have never been able to say no to her. My body acted before my mind could protest. I found myself nodding, and as I watched her elegant form, 1,000 unspoken words dissolved into a single, silent sigh. And just like that, I was back on her team, in charge of her wedding. Maybe seeing her walk down the aisle would be the closure I needed to finally let go. My guilt toward Ethan drove me to pursue perfection. I obsessed over every detail, determined to give Catherine the wedding of her dreams. Yet Catherine herself was a ghost. She rarely showed up for meetings or fittings, communicating everything through me, as if she were deliberately keeping her distance. It was as if this wasn't her wedding at all, but some perfunctory ceremony she was forced to attend. Ethan grew more melancholic by the day. One afternoon, during a suit fitting, he looked at me, his eyes full of a quiet desperation. Can you ask her if she's coming today? It wasn't my place to make that call, but seeing his defeated expression, I dialed her number. The background was noisy, and Catherine's voice was laced with fatigue. I was about to hang up, but the image of Ethan's hopeful face flashed in my mind. The wedding dress has been delivered, I said carefully. Would you like to come see it? There was a long pause. Then softly, okay, come pick me up. I didn't understand her reasoning, but I did as she asked. When I arrived at the club, everyone else was gone. She was standing alone by the window, lost in thought. I approached quietly. Ms. Pierce, Ms. Pierce. She turned, and for a split second, her eyes held an expression I couldn't decipher, something raw and vulnerable that made me freeze. Then, just as quickly, the mask of cool indifference was back in place, and I wondered if I'd imagined it. I helped her into the car. She was silent the entire ride, her eyes closed as if shutting out the world. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. It was rare to have a chance to look at her so openly, and I let my eyes linger for a moment too long. A fresh wave of guilt washed over me as I thought of Ethan. I looked away, focusing on the road. Suddenly, a prickle of unease ran down my spine. I've always trusted my gut, and my mind started racing. Something was wrong. A black SUV had been tailing us for the last half hour, maintaining a constant, unnerving distance. Ms. Pierce, Ms. Pierce, I said, trying to wake her, but she remained asleep in the back. With no other choice, I slammed on the accelerator. The SUV immediately sped up, and soon we were careening down the winding mountain road. Their vehicle was clearly modified. No matter how fast I went, they stayed glued to my bumper. Then, the black SUV swerved and slammed into us. The impact sent our car spinning. I wrenched the wheel, narrowly avoiding plunging over the cliffside. The world became a blur of motion and shattering glass. My vision was red, my head swimming. I crawled out of the driver's seat. Catherine was pinned in the back. She was awake now, trying to move, but the twisted metal frame held her fast. I grabbed the tire iron from the trunk and tried to pry the door open, but the frame was too badly damaged. Gasoline was leaking from the tank, and smoke began to curl from the back seat. In the face of crisis, my mind became razor sharp. All I could think about was getting Catherine out. The fire was spreading. The salary I pay you isn't worth dying for, Catherine said, her voice surprisingly steady. Liam, get out of here. The car's going to explode. Her words grated on my already frayed nerves. Shut up, I yelled, cutting her off. A strange smile touched her lips. I didn't have time to wonder what it meant. The flames licked higher. Blood dripped from a gash on my arm. Gritting my teeth, I summoned every ounce of strength I had and finally pulled her free from the wreckage. I supported her, and we stumbled away from the car. We hadn't gotten far when it exploded, a fireball that lit up the night sky in a bloody orange. I was just thankful I kept up my gym routine. That strength had just saved both our lives. The wail of sirens grew louder in the distance, and a wave of exhaustion washed over me. My consciousness began to fade. Catherine came to first. In the instant before the crash, she'd seen Liam wrench the steering wheel towards himself, taking the brunt of the impact. She watched the man in the hospital bed, feeling as if she were seeing him for the first time. She had endured a lifetime of betrayals. During a childhood kidnapping, her own father had abandoned her to save himself, leaving her to face her captors alone. Her mother had promised to always be there, only to end her own life with a piano wire. People had come and gone, always leaving, teaching her to rely on no one. And then there was this man, the one person who had every reason to save himself, yet he had stayed. She, who prided herself on reading people, couldn't decipher him. What was he thinking? I awoke from a hazy dream to find Catherine staring at me. My chest tightened. Had she figured it out? Her gaze was intense, our eyes locked. My palms grew slick with sweat. Why did you save me? She asked. My mind raced. A second later, I forced a smile. Ms. Pierce, I'm a gambler. The chance to have a world-famous pianist owe me a life debt? That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Her brow furrowed as she studied me, as if weighing the truth of my words. In her world, a person with no demands was the most dangerous. A clear price tag was a source of comfort. I considered what I could ask for that would be worthy of risking my life. Finally, I landed on an answer that would put her at ease. I want the exclusive management rights to your next album. That should be enough to set me up for life. I saw the tension in her shoulders relax. I made the right move. She gave a small, wry laugh. An album is so intangible. How about a music shop in Midtown? What do you think, Liam? I smiled back. A multi-million-dollar shop? I accept. Thank you, Ms. Pierce. We had our transaction. She no longer had to feel indebted to me. She stood up, her tone once again cool and distant. Then rest well, Liam. You don't need to worry about the engagement party anymore. I spent a week in the hospital. The day I was discharged was the day of Catherine and Ethan's engagement party. Every entertainment outlet was buzzing about the union of the Pierce and Shaw dynasties. The grand concert hall was decorated like a fairy tale, with crystal chandeliers casting a dazzling glow. This was it, the end of the story. We would both go our separate ways. But I couldn't shake the ache in my chest. I wandered the streets aimlessly and found myself in a quiet cocktail bar. I was always the one cleaning up messes. I rarely allowed myself to get drunk. I ordered a whiskey on the rocks. The burn as it went down made me wince. They say you drink to forget, but the bitter taste only brought tears to my eyes. They fell into the glass, turning my drink into a cocktail of bitter memories. As the world began to blur, I fumbled for my phone and called a car service, begging the dispatcher to make sure the driver got me home safely. At the engagement party, Catherine received an unexpected call. It was Liam. It gave her the perfect excuse to escape the suffocating charade. When she arrived at the bar, the driver in a crisp uniform rushed over. This gentleman is very drunk, ma'am. He couldn't tell me his address, so I called the most frequent number in his contacts. He looked at Catherine nervously. You're not his boss, are you? I hope he won't file a complaint when he sobers up. Catherine took Liam from him, her voice calm. Don't worry. I'll take it from here. She helped Liam out of the bar. He was like a petulant child, sometimes stroking her cheek, other times playfully messing up her hair. Catherine had never seen him so unguarded. She decided to test him. Why did you choose to stay by my side all these years? The drunken man mumbled, a goofy, innocent smile on his face. To repay a debt. What debt? You saved my life. Catherine pressed on. And how do you plan to repay it? By giving her the most wonderful things in the world. Why are you so devoted? Because I'm in love with her. Catherine had studied psychology at Juilliard. She knew the art of gentle interrogation. She had been searching for the truth, but she never expected an answer like this. He loved her. Liam Evans loved her. Catherine studied his drunken state. His smile was pure, his eyes clouded with intoxication. There wasn't a hint of deceit. Countless men had professed their love for her, but she had never encountered a love like this, one buried so deep for so long, completely unknown to the world. Suddenly, so many things made sense, like why there was never any sign of a woman in Liam's apartment. Catherine fell into deep thought. Could she trust this feeling? A heart so devoted it would risk death without a second thought. The next day, I woke up with a splitting headache, the ghost of a dream lingering in my mind. The only thing I could clearly remember was Catherine's eyes, bright as stars. Why was I still dreaming of her? Fantasizing about another man's fiancé was wrong. For the next few months, I avoided all entertainment news. I took trains across the country, leaving footprints in unfamiliar cities. I visited single-parent families in need, using my savings to offer them whatever help I could. I often wondered if a helping hand could have changed my mother's fate. There was too much suffering in the world. All I could do was help those within my reach. Then, one day, the news broke. Catherine Pierce, the goddess of the piano, was retiring from music. The media ran a photo of her and Ethan, dramatically torn down the middle, with the headline, Dynastic engagement off. Why did the piano maestro walk away? Panicked, I called Ethan. His voice was weary. Liam, this was a family business decision. Personal feelings had to take a back seat. There was nothing I could do. After I calmed down, I started to see the bigger picture. This was Catherine's meticulously planned exit. For years, she had worn a mask of glamour, but I had sensed her exhaustion, the way the golden cage of fame was suffocating her. I had tried to talk to her about it, but she always deflected. All this time, she had been planning her escape. I remembered her drunken vulnerability, the way she called her world a cage. Right now, what she needed most was an anchor, someone to offer warmth and support, just like she had done for me when she grabbed my hand on that rooftop. The thought propelled me into action. I raced to her studio. The once bright building was now dark. The last of her funds had been used to provide severance for her staff. I walked down the silent hallway and pushed open the door to her practice room. She was sitting at the piano, shrouded in shadows. The wind billowed the curtains, playing a lonely melody. She looked up at me, her eyes deep and unreadable, as if holding a universe of secrets. I slowly reached out and took her hand. The words I had rehearsed 1,000 times vanished in the warmth of her touch. In that moment, all I wanted was to hold her hand, just as she had once held mine, offering strength and hope. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, a brilliant pianist crushed by the rules of the elite, who became a tragic footnote in the music world. They had tried to turn a pure artist into a commercial product, forcing her to play games, to smile and network, to compromise. Everyone had pushed her mother closer to the edge. They said she didn't understand business, that she didn't deserve her position. But what if the rules themselves were wrong? The Pierce family was still involved in illegal music licensing, a dark secret her mother had discovered and tried to expose, only to be consumed by lies. Catherine had planned to face it all alone, to let the darkness die with her. But then Liam appeared. Was it because of love? When he arrived, she had seen him immediately. While everyone else was packing up to leave, he was walking against the tide, moving through the scattered sheet music toward her, like a knight in a fairy tale, rushing to his princess. The thought made Catherine smile. How can anyone be so foolish? He walked right up to her and took her hand. A steady warmth flowed from his palm into hers. Only then did Catherine realize how cold her own hands were. She squeezed his hand back. In this turbulent storm, his touch was the only thing that felt real. I helped Catherine liquidate the studio. When she gave a final press conference, angry fans threw eggs at her. The Pierce family owed the world a great deal of truth, and the public needed an outlet for their rage. It was a price that had to be paid. The night she officially retired, my grandfather-in-law-to-be, the patriarch of the Pierce family, had a massive stroke. Later that evening, she asked me to have a drink with her. When I arrived, I realized it was her private studio. I hesitated at the door. This doesn't feel appropriate. We weren't exactly drinking buddies. The intimacy of it felt unnerving. Catherine's eyes were downcast, her entire being exuding a sense of desolation. Her voice was thick with emotion. Was she crying? He was her family, after all. My heart ached for her. I took the bottle of wine from her, and I saw a flicker of light in her eyes. Fine. What was one night of drinking? Patience, after all, was my specialty. I had never seen Catherine like this. Her black dress was rumpled, her dark hair a tangled mess. She seemed so fragile, as if she might dissipate into the night air. She was always so poised, the untouchable center of attention. Now, she looked like a fallen angel. In her drunken haze, she kept murmuring my name, demanding a response. Her voice was a sweet, intoxicating whisper that made my heart hammer against my ribs. She leaned in close, the space between us no more than a hand's breadth. Moonlight caught on her long lashes, casting tiny shadows on her cheeks. Liam, she breathed, will you always stay with me? I didn't answer right away. A lifetime is a long time. Who can promise forever? Besides, I was just her manager. But she was insistent, like a stubborn child demanding an answer. Yes, I finally whispered. I'll always be here. Satisfied, she fell quiet, her brow furrowed as she looked at me. Suddenly, she complained of being hot, and with a delicate hand, she pushed her hair aside, revealing the pale, graceful curve of her neck. The gesture was unconsciously seductive. I had never thought I would use that word to describe Catherine Pierce. I froze for a second, then quickly looked away. But she kept leaning closer. I could feel the heat rising in my face. It was a cold winter night, but the room felt stifling. I forced myself to create some distance between us. She gave me a quizzical look before turning back to her wine, finally drinking herself into oblivion. Just before she passed out, she stared at me, her eyes holding a look of encouragement. Why encouragement? I put her to bed and went home, but I tossed and turned all night, unable to understand. The next day, she called to thank me for taking care of her. I laughed it off. It's my job, Ms. Pierce. There was a pause on the other end. Then, through gritted teeth, she said, Liam, you are so. She hung up before finishing, leaving me utterly confused. With the studio dissolved, we had no reason to see each other. Days went by. Then one night, she showed up at my door drunk again. The moment I opened it, she collapsed into my arms. I managed to get her to the sofa. As I tried to step away, she grabbed my wrist, pulling me off balance. I tumbled into her arms. There was barely an inch between us. She stared into my eyes and whispered my name. Liam. It was the most ordinary name, but the way she said it sent a shiver through me. Her eyes reflected my own image, as if I were the only person in her world. The sound of my own heartbeat was a deafening drum in my ears. Our breaths mingled in the small space between us. I found myself leaning in, drawn by an irresistible force, until our lips met. In that instant, my reason shattered. All the years of restraint, all the carefully constructed walls, melted away. At dawn, I fled like a coward. I was halfway down the block before I remembered it was my own apartment. I wandered the neighborhood until dusk, then crept back and turned the doorknob as quietly as I could. The lights flipped on, blinding me. Catherine was still there, sitting on the sofa, one eyebrow arched, planning on being a man who loves them and leaves them. I was trapped in the doorway, unable to move forward or back. Come here, she said. We need to talk. I opened my mouth to explain that last night was a mistake, a moment of weakness, but she held up a hand to stop me. You're terrible with words. Let me talk this time. Her expression was more serious than I had ever seen it. My heart leaped into my throat. Liam, you always see me as this perfect, untouchable thing. But I'm just a person. I have desires. I feel jealousy. I fall in love. I wanted to argue, but her next words silenced me. Your judgment is probably clouded right now, so asking you to make a choice is unfair, she continued. But I'm more afraid of giving you too much time to think. I'm afraid that when you see the real me, all of me, you won't like me anymore. I don't care if what you feel for me is gratitude or idolization. You stirred something in my heart, and you don't get to just walk away. She pulled a small box from her pocket. Inside was a brilliant diamond ring. Her eyes shone brighter than the stone. Liam Evans, do you want to try spending the rest of your life with me? My mind went blank. I nodded, not even realizing I was doing it. She smiled a soft, genuine smile and slid the ring onto my finger. Do you have your ID? I nodded again, mechanically. Her smile widened. Good. Let's go. Go where? City Hall. As the sun set, we walked out of the building holding our marriage certificate, the last couple to get married that evening. The sky was ablaze in fiery orange and gold. And for the first time in a long, long time, all my anxiety and confusion finally had a place to rest.